Would you like to play some football?
Welcome back, or actually, I guess, welcome to this week's edition of Gridiron and the Gospel of Faith in College Football podcast. I'm George Schroeder, joined by Dean and Sarah, and we got plenty of stuff to talk about, Dean. I mean, two mammoth upsets, one of which is really, really, really kind of seismic and kind of surprised me. So let's start with that. We're going to talk Florida's upset of Texas, but I still cannot fathom how UCLA beat Penn State. And I don't want to hear about body clocks and everything else. I get it, but it usually works going the other direction when you're on the East Coast. But UCLA, which had not only not won a game and had lost their coach, been fired a couple weeks earlier, and had a midweek change with a new offensive coordinator who's Jerry Neuheisel, Rick's son, who's never called plays before, and 11 years ago was a walk-on quarterback at UCLA. Not only hadn't won a game, had not led in a game all year, beats Penn State, and really was up fairly big on him at one point. And I don't even know where to begin. They had played nobody, and they had had zero success against nobodies. And all of a sudden, here you go. I mean, you had to be sort of like flipping over. It's like watching a car wreck or something. Like, how is this happening?
Well, not only can Penn State not win the big game, but apparently they can't beat the worst Power 4 team probably there is as well. What a shocking game. Yeah, and I'm sure there wasn't a ton of people there to see it in the Rose Bowl. Probably a lot of Penn State fans who live out there showed up. But what a win. And I don't know if anyone saw, we talk about faith on this podcast as well. And if you want, one of the important components of faith is family and fatherhood. I don't know if our listeners had a chance to see Rick Neuheisel when he was asked about his son at, Rick's alma mater as well, where he played quarterback, and to see his reaction, just like got emotional thinking about his son and how proud he was of his kid for as an adult, what he was able to accomplish that day along with the team. It's a really neat story, but the football story is Penn State. I mean, there are people that had them in the national championship game, like a common national
9 days
game. ago.
Yeah. 9 days ago, you'd have put him in there.
A common national championship game pick was Clemson versus Penn State. Now they're going to be nowhere to be found. Clemson gets to make the playoffs if they, I guess, win out and Miami loses a couple games. Or
if they can play Bill Belichick every week, they'll be fine.
Yeah. I think at the AC championship they can win and go because the automatic bid. But man, what a big, like a cosmic shift in college football preseason compared to what's reality now. Really quickly by the first week in October. Those two teams.
Amazing. I mean, six weeks in, right? You're either halfway through your season or not quite halfway through your season. And yeah, an amazing shift. Now, here's the thing about it. We were talking about James Franklin after the close loss at home in the whiteout to Oregon about how he can't win those big games against the highly ranked teams. And that's a real thing. But the one thing they had done at Penn State is they had not been losing these kind of games where they took care of business. Penn State has taken care of business and typically routed the teams you're supposed to beat. And so this was
we can't beat Ohio State. That's basically the criticism, right? Right. Or those kind of level teams.
Or, Harbaugh got Michigan going. They couldn't beat Michigan. That was it. And then now you add Oregon into the mix. It's been those kinds of the top tier teams in the sport. They couldn't quite get over the hump. And so even after they lost to Oregon, you had to feel like, okay, look, maybe that was your best shot. You were at home and everything else, and they're not as good as you thought they were. But it's just continuing that narrative. But there's still this, there's no way you can even think about parting ways with James Franklin. And by the way, just so you know, Pennsylvania open records law make it hard to figure out. But the best guess is he got about a $50 million buyout. And the fact that I'm actually talking about that is not something we would have been talking about until Saturday. I don't believe that's how that'll work, but if you're not going to, if you're not going to beat the teams to get to the top where they think you should be, and then you're going to slide back, and I realize this is a one-time thing, but let's just see what this team does, because I don't see them getting to the playoff. You got 2 losses. If you run the table, you're going to beat Ohio State and Indiana, and you'll probably get to the playoff. In fact, you run the table, if you're in the Big Ten championship game, you will get to the playoff. But does anybody see that happening at this point?
No, I don't think so. And again, to fire somebody who's winning 10 games a year, it almost sounds kind of John Cooper-esque at Ohio State. But the difference is Penn State doesn't have a true rival anymore. Since they don't play Pitt regularly, they don't play West Virginia regularly. They don't have that true one big rival. So that might be his saving grace, is he's not losing that game to the one the boosters just can't handle. But one thing I could see happen, this is just my speculation, is they might want like an unofficial handshake parting
That's
and
right.
him go
Yep.
take a job that might come open that we don't even know about that's going to be open yet, like a major Power 5 job somewhere that was maybe a new change of scenery and take a risk on him.
Well, that's kind of where I was heading with that because I mean the buyout is prohibitive. It makes no sense to do, but barring some crazy run and they get into the playoff. And by the way, getting in the playoff wasn't supposed to be the thing, right? They were supposed to really take the next step this year. They got to
Make
the
a
playoff.
run.
They were this close to getting to the title game last year. They brought everybody back. This was the team. And people were kind of looking at them like, this is kind of like their version of 2023 Michigan when Jim Harbaugh brought everybody back and they're ready for a run, right? This was the team, and they just have not looked like what anybody thought they were going to look like. And it starts a lot of different places. They can't run the ball with really good running backs. And then Drew Aller hasn't made steps as a quarterback. But regardless, I think what you're talking about is potentially, if something's going to happen, it's the way it'll happen is James Franklin kind of find some place. There's going to be other jobs. There's, several Power 4 jobs open now. There's going to be several others that'll be fairly attractive open. Maybe he finds a kind of a semi-graceful exit and everybody knows what's going on. But I'm not pushing him out the door. I'm just saying that's what a seismic loss that was to a terrible team last week.
Yeah, a terrible team. I mean, I can't believe it. That's an all-time loss for Penn State.
It was
the recovery looks like.
It was the first time that a team that was 0-4 or worse had beaten a top 10 team in the AP poll since 1985. So it's been 40 years.
Yeah, and I didn't want to punish them for losing to Oregon. People went bananas because it's a big game and Penn State lost. But to go overtime against that caliber of team, I mean, to me, it was almost like a wash. They should barely even drop a spot in the polls. After that, you shouldn't be ranked. I believe they're not ranked in the AP poll. And neither is Texas after their loss in Gainesville on Saturday.
So Texas has not beaten a Power 4 opponent yet. Wow. So, what was interesting was, Arch Manning showed some glimpses and was largely underwhelming or overwhelmed or both. Again, the O-line still isn't very good. And maybe at some point we have to think about Texas is not reloading. They replaced 4 offensive linemen. How good are they actually? But it's we have to think through those things with when it comes to Texas. But here's what was crazy to me was the defense made what has been a very mediocre offense in Florida look really good. That's what was wild to me.
Yeah, of course it was an upset because you have a highly ranked team against a team that I think Florida was 1-3. But I don't know anyone that's that surprised that it happened. After watching Florida's defense play against LSU, against Miami, again, of course it was an upset. And those guys, that team, something about Billy Napier, they seem to want to play for him. You're not seeing them shut down. I mean, they were in all the games. I mean, Miami really out physically played them, and the famous, we call it Mario ball, kind of kept them close, by kind of getting conservative in the fourth quarter and then pulled away. But you see a lot of teams that are in their situation to shut down. Florida doesn't seem to do that. They're still playing hard and they have talent. There's actual talent there. DJ definitely played better. And he's obviously the key because the defense is going to be there the rest of the year. The issue is going to be, can Lagway become the Lagway that we saw a little bit last year in glimpses and that preseason declared him to be? Arch and Lagway were supposed to be the 2 best quarterbacks, right, in college football coming back.
Well, K. Klubnik maybe, and then Drew Aller.
And Drew Aller, yeah. Those are the ones.
Well, I want you to think about this. Trendy picks, and some of them weren't trendy. They were almost consensus-ish picks preseason to win the national championship, okay? And I'm not in no particular order. You had people that were saying Texas. You had some people thought, hey, it could be Penn State now. And then you had you had other programs. You had the Ohio States, and let's pick a Georgia or an Alabama in the world, right? You had those guys. But you also had people saying, I think Clemson's going to get it back. So if you think about
Clemson,
Penn State, Texas, and Clemson are essentially, Clemson's actually looking like the best of those 3. And a week ago, we would have been saying, what is wrong with these guys? And because there's something wrong with them. But it's amazing just how far below expectations Penn State and Texas and Clemson, but Penn State and Texas have fallen. Because I think Clemson was a bit of a reach for most people. The other 2 weren't.
Yeah, and then you got a big Florida-Texas A&M game coming up next week. So after that Texas win, all of a sudden, that game matters a lot. And that's, I think, one thing, a question hasn't been asked very much in college football world lately is Texas A&M for real? Now, Notre Dame's a botched extra point snap away from possibly beating them in South Bend. That's football, right? But is Texas A&M a actual playoff contender? And it looks like they really are.
I don't even think there's a question that they're a playoff contender. My question would be this. Okay, as you look around the SEC, which is the best team right now? It might be A&M. You could maybe say Alabama has rebounded from the loss to Florida State, and they're looking really good. Ty Simpson, we can talk about them here in a minute, but they look really good. But A&M looks really solid. I don't think that I'm completely trusting the offense, but their defense is real good. They've allowed one third down conversion against Auburn and Mississippi State. One third down, and it's like 1 out of 26 attempts, something like that in the last two.
Oklahoma with my healthy Mateer, in the mix there.
Maybe. Not quite ready to go there yet. We get a chance to look at them again this week. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but OU Texas, Texas OU at the State Fair, and I don't know if Mateer is going to play or not as we record this. I think the Sooners are going to kind of keep that quiet and see if he plays. But I mean, who would you say? Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama? I don't know that I would say it's Georgia. You could say Ole Miss, maybe.
Tennessee's quietly 4-1 and could have won against Georgia. I think you're going to get 5, maybe 6 SEC teams in.
I do too.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is where they have had a tier in recent years, the narrative has always been that the SEC is the best and the deepest conference, and quite often it is. But often there was a gap between a team or 2 or 2.5 teams, and then a big gap to wherever the next team really was in terms of performance. This feels like it's almost that there's 5 or 6 that you could say these guys could beat anybody on any of these other guys on any given day, depending on breaks and things like that. It feels wide open in the SEC, and I think that's actually kind of fun, more fun than kind of
Alabama and everybody else.
Yeah, or then when Kirby got it going, it was sort of Georgia and everybody else, and then LSU would pop up every so often, right?
Yeah, that run.
Right. So I just I think the SEC race is fascinating, and it's funny because it's maybe Alabama, but it's not really the programs you would have expected going into the year. That which sort of mimics what we were talking about, or mirrors what we were talking about a second ago. Now the Big Ten race looks an awful lot like we would have thought going into the year, except for one program. So I think we thought Ohio State was going to be good. We thought Penn State was going to be good, so they don't seem to be. And then we thought, okay, if Oregon gets quarterback play, they could be really good again. And they've gotten really good quarterback play. We talked about them last year. The team that continues to surprise is the answer to the question, who's this year's Indiana? And you answered that last week.
Yeah, he really is.
Still Indiana. Kurt Cignetti.
So it's unbelievable what he's doing. And if they get beat by Oregon, which they most likely will at Autzen, everybody's going to say, see, they're not that good. It's like, no, this is a good football team again. Mendoza's a top-level quarterback. They're so well coached. They play hard. I don't think they're going to win. I think winning 10 games would be very significant for them. I think they're a 9-3 team. But I think their ceiling is 10-2. But to come off last year's run as a Cinderella and not win 6 games the next year like an Indiana team would have, just shows how strong they really are. They destroyed Illinois. And it's not like Illinois is a bad team. I mean, they're well coached. They have a good quarterback. They're physical. So I think we'll give Oregon a game for at least a half.
Yeah. I think so too. And obviously that's where College Game Day is going. Probably because Texas lost to Florida. Otherwise, they'd probably be at the State Fair of Texas for Texas OU Texas. We really need to kind of get into what happened in your town Saturday night, where Florida State geared up for a big game, and Miami came to town. The rivalry's a big one, and basically did whatever it wanted for 3 quarters and just really was superior and dominant and looked like a national title contender. And then Florida State had a really good 4th quarter and made a game of it. But I mean, an amazing performance by your Miami Hurricanes in your hometown.
Yeah, I was there. Just a great experience. And here's what you saw. I think you saw the most complete team in college football. I mean, before the season, it was, is Carson Beck going to be healthy? Will he fit? They lost all the receivers. Are they going to be good? We knew the lines were going to be good. They replaced the entire secondary in the portal, basically, minus Frederic, who's the corner. So I really do think you looked at the best, most complete team in the country. I'm not saying they're going to the national championship, but in terms of right now, like who is clicking the most, we are just had finished the first week in October by the time we recorded this. Miami already has wins against Notre Dame. Florida has a very good defense, ranked South Florida, and Florida State at home in front of a sold-out crowd in a primetime game. I mean, this team is clicking, and they're doing it everywhere. So, of course, Florida State's going to stack the box after, what Miami's known for. Mario wants to run the ball, and after UVA ran all over them, especially straight up the middle, they really try to do a lot in the middle. And Miami said, okay, fine, we'll do that a little bit. Then we're going to throw over top, and then we're going to move the ball around. And Miami did that. So there's nothing that offense can't do. And the Miami defense is the best it's been since the turnover chain years. So now the only question is Mario going to go into Mario mode where he lets teams back into games like he did against Florida, like he did against Notre Dame, like he did against Florida State on Saturday night? And is that going to cost you if you get a lead on an Ohio State or an Oregon, someone along those lines? So I think that's the one question mark is Mario going to just let it be and take the boot to the throat when he can? But it was quite the scene on Saturday night. That was an absolute massacre until the fourth quarter. Florida State could not do anything. Miami had 42 pressures. Ruben Bain, defensive end, had more pressures than Florida State's entire defense did. I mean, it was that kind of physical dominance.
This shouldn't surprise you knowing, Mario Cristobal's heritage, but they're along both lines. They are really, really good offensive and defensive lines.
That. He said, we're going to get big. We're going to recruit the line. We're going to get people in here. Those lines are elite. Defensive ends, Mesidor and Bain, the havoc they create in the backfield is unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I know that's really fun for you, having grown up as a Canes fan in Tallahassee, but that means that virtually everybody you know and are friends with is on the other side of that. So how's that?
Well, I don't say a word at church about it because it's too sensitive. And relationships matter more. It's like coaches that go to our church, that's their livelihood, right? So I'm not going to go up there and gloat in my team winning is not more important than their well-being, right? And where they are. I also want them to know that I support them and I'm for them. And there's players who are at church on Sunday morning. So I'm just not going to say anything from church. A lot of times in a football town, somebody will make a joke about the game. I'll make a Gator joke because that's fine. That's harmless. In Tallahassee, there's some Gator fans. They just kind of laugh it up. You had to be careful. I mean, I'll talk to a bunch of buddies about it. I'll text some friends, that kind of thing. We'll talk about it in the lobby at church, but I'm never going to say anything, up front or in front of a crowd or anything like that. Or I'm not going to post anything. I post a lot of Miami stuff, but not when Miami plays Florida State. I'm not going to do that just because of my role. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, well, really, really impressive by Miami. And I got to be honest with you, had they been made number one by the voters, I would not have had any issue with that at all. I understand that Ohio State doesn't have the resume, especially with the Texas win not looking the same. But all they've done is dominate people. They've looked really, really good. Continue to do that. They play at Illinois this week, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah, another shot for Ohio State to maybe get a challenge. But if you just go flat resume at this point of the year, Miami's got the best resume.
Most wins versus ranked teams.
Mm-hmm.
Currently ranked teams. Yeah.
So anyway, I really like what I'm seeing out of Miami. And I'm glad you talked. Carson Beck looks like what they'd hoped he would be. Obviously, he had to come off the injury and everything else. But, his last year at Georgia was just sort of so-so. But you knew that he had this NFL-type allure talent, and you just wanted to see it happen at Miami, and here it is.
If anyone, for our listeners, if you had a chance to go look at the highlight to put in the Miami's flea flicker right after the interception, he threw an absolute beauty to true freshman Malachi Toney for a touchdown, and you want to see what he's really made of. I mean, if he keeps going like this, I think he'll be in New York as a finalist for the Heisman.
Well, let me take you to another quarterback who might be a finalist for the Heisman, who you wouldn't have predicted this after game one when he lost in Tallahassee to Florida State. But Ty Simpson, Alabama's quarterback, has really played well ever since then. And
he has.
They had a revenge game against Vanderbilt, which is kind of funny to say, talking about Alabama still. And really, they were pretty close to going down 2 scores early, had a strip sack, which was really important, and the momentum changed. And Alabama really dominated that game and ended up, it was a little closer than the final outcome, I think was 30-14, but really played well, which most years we would not even be talking about Alabama, Vanderbilt on a wrap up the weekend and look forward to next weekend podcast. But because Vanderbilt has turned into a good program under Clark Lee, all of a sudden, and Diego Pavia is a good quarterback, and I think they're better than they were a year ago. That was a really important win. And I thought, I really thought that, once again, Ty Simpson played really, really well. And Alabama, never mind that opening loss to Florida State, you've got to really look at them in that group of SEC teams as maybe this is the one.
Yeah, if there's an award given out for most improved from game 1 to game 2, 3, 4, I mean, Simpson absolutely is it. He looks like a completely different quarterback. He looks like an NFL quarterback. And against Florida State, it was, is this the guy? Does he have a short leash? Is he going to be not the starter by next week? And man, has he turned it around and looks absolutely fantastic. So I think, I was pretty critical of Alabama, after the first week. I mean, I watched every play of that game and saw a team that did not look like any Alabama team I had seen in a very long time. They looked more like a middle of the pack SEC team than an elite. Since then, I think they look completely different and they're winning. And I think they're a force to be reckoned with, which is not shocking when you see the logo. We don't want to base things on logos. We want to base it on production and what we see. And they're rolling right now. I wouldn't want to play them right now.
No. And look, they're still really talented. It's just possible this Kalen DeBoer guy knows how to coach a little.
Yeah, seriously. Anyone who doesn't think he knows how to coach, that's one thing I refused to say after that game was that he's not a great coach. The guy has won everywhere he has gone. You might say, well, he doesn't understand SEC culture. Well, Nick Saban was at Michigan State before he went to LSU, and Les Miles was at Oklahoma State, before he went to work. Urban Meyer was at Bowling Green in Utah before he came to UF. I don't think that's a big deal as people think it is.
It's only a big deal when it is, but I don't think Joe Moorhead quite got it. But on the other hand, Mississippi State's one of the toughest places to coach in the SEC.
Yeah, so whoever wins there. Lane Kiffin was, before he went to Bama and through the first forward pass in Alabama history, was USC, Oakland Raiders. I mean,
yeah. But he was at Tennessee, and then
before that though, he was at. So it's like if you can coach, you can coach. It takes a minute.
No, that's right.
You got to warm up to the boosters and understand recruiting and all that. But now in a portal world, that's not even as important as it used to be.
No, it's not.
It's always exception. But
hey, it's look. The jury's going to be out on Kalen DeBoer until they win a national title, but because of who he's following. He's following Nick Saban, the greatest of all time. That's just true. We can talk about the factors that led to that and how it's a different era and this, that, and the other. But what Nick Saban did, I think, in a more difficult era to win than the Bear or somebody like that is amazing. That's who you're following. And so Alabama fans are super spoiled and they know that. And, there's a rule, never follow the legend. It's like no one wants to follow Dean and Sarah at City Church, right? So, and I'm kidding. Everybody wants to follow you. I'm just, but you know what I'm saying. You don't want to follow the legend. You want to be the guy after the guy.
You want to be Urban Meyer, not Ron Zook following Steve Spurrier.
That's right. Exactly right.
Well, you want to be.
So we could go on and on, but this week, we didn't think that last week was going to present a great slate of games, and so that's what happened. We got great games and crazy upsets. So this week has some more allure to it. You've got OU Texas, Texas OU, depends on which side of the Red River you reside on. And since I live on the south side, I should probably be saying Texas OU. Playing at the State Fair, we're going to see all the aerial shots of Big Tex and the Ferris wheel and the Cotton Bowl with 50,000 Texas fans in one horseshoe in burnt orange and 50,000 OU fans in one horseshoe in crimson. It's as great a pageant as there is in college football, including the old school bowl games. And Texas's loss, we talked about a minute ago, puts a little bit of a damper on it. I think the Mateer injury puts a little bit of a damper on it. But this is, we're going to learn a lot more about both of these teams, a lot more about both of them. I'll just put it this way, based on what we've seen of them so far, if you knew Mateer was healthy and ready to go, I would choose Oklahoma. I'd pick Oklahoma based on what we've seen. And it's as much OU's defense as it is their offense has gotten good with Mateer and with Ben Arbuckle, the new offensive coordinator. And it's because of their defense and because of Texas's offensive struggles, especially along the offensive line. Texas and Oklahoma's got a good defensive line that I still think a lot of people may still pick OU, even if they think it's going to be Michael Hawkins at quarterback.
Yeah, well, Venerables versus Sark on paper should be this marquee matchup. These two gurus known as like the best, right in the upper echelon of the best in what they do on their side of the ball. And again, it's not like Sark forgot to coach either. It's not a DeBoer situation. It's different because Sark's been to playoffs at Texas already. But I still feel like the light switch is going to go off. Like Arch is going to get better. Sark is going to dial it in. Is it going to be this weekend? I'm not sure. But also, how many times have we seen Red River shootouts where the team that was supposed to get hammered wound up blowing out the other team? Even we've seen those type of things happen. That's what I love about this game. I'm a college football fan. I watch any game. I watch the Wednesday night November MAC game. I mean, I'll watch everything. But there's one of the must-see TV games for me to make sure I'm right in front of the couch, not moving. Every year it's Oklahoma, Texas. Because I love the pageantry. I love the rivalry. And I love what it is. So I'm excited for it.
We got to get you to one of those times. So, long ago, I covered OU football for the Oklahoma City paper, the Oklahoman, long ago. And then, more recently when I was at USA Today, every so often, I don't know, every other year or every third year, it was a game that we needed to cover because of one or both of the teams might be in a playoff type run. It was mostly Oklahoma during that time, but I just there's nothing like it. You got to do it. And then they're playing it at 2:30, which is probably better than the 11 a.m. kick, 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern, better than the 11 a.m. or noon kick.
Oh, that's
that
right.
that
They
they
backed it up. Okay, I'm always used to it being that noon Eastern time kickoff on ABC.
So why what they will never agree. Neither program will ever agree to have it as a night game because they're concerned about sort of what that could do for fan behavior and a lot of other things with the state fair and all day long to get ready for the game, and then you spill out onto the midway afterwards and and driving home and all that kind of stuff. So
I love it
they've
being noon. I want Ohio State Michigan at noon, and I want the Red River at noon Eastern time.
I'd have no problem with that. Hey, one real quick programming note. It has nothing to do with Gridiron and the Gospel, but the American Heart Association sponsors the Bear Bryant Coaching Awards, and their executive director for the Bryant Awards, so he's employed by the American Heart Association, called me up a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, we're going to have Mac Brown and Barry Switzer at a lunch do a panel discussion to talk about the Red River reunion, as they call it. The Red River Shootout is what it's always been. It's going to be at Texas Live in Arlington, Texas on Friday, the 10th. And would you like to come MC it, George?" And I was like, well, let me check my schedule. Yes, I would like to do that.
Absolutely.
And I know both those guys fairly well just from being in the media. And here's my only real concern. I'm not concerned. I don't think I even need to ask like a question. What I got to do is try to keep those guys between the rails.
They'll chat it up. I saw Barry Switzer's 88.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last time I saw him, he was a little just, a half step slower than he used to be. And obviously a little more than that, but still, and this has been a year or so since I bumped into him, hale and hearty and same guy. So, and then, Mac, things didn't go so well at North Carolina, but suddenly his tenure at North Carolina looks a lot better than it did. Now.
And Drake May last night, on a Sunday night with a big win over the Bills for the Patriots, he's starting to come on as a top. He was.
He looked really good.
I'm a lifelong Hurricane fan. Grew up in the Orange Bowl as a kid. And when I think of Barry Switzer, I think of Miami beating him several times in big games with Brian Bosworth and Keith Jackson, the tight end, not the announcer, and company. And
right.
I have fond memories of the wishbone against that Miami Speed back in the day.
Keith Jackson. Love Keith, Little Rock native. So when I started my journalism career in my hometown paper at Little Rock, I got to know Keith fairly well. He was finishing up his career with the Packers, and he has been hugely involved in community involvement in Little Rock.
That's great. He still lives there?
He still does, yeah.
That's great.
So love that. So I guess real quick, that game is a game that's going to be on everybody's dial. Indiana at Oregon would be the only other one that and look, there's some more. Alabama, Missouri, Florida, Texas A&M. Those are both intriguing. Ohio State, Illinois is intriguing, even though we saw what Indiana did to Illinois. Somebody's going to go, hey, what about Georgia at Auburn? I'm sure somebody has something else. But Indiana at Oregon, if I'd have told you 20 years ago, Indiana at Oregon is going to be a top 10 matchup that College Game Day wants to come to, would you have laughed me off the face of the earth?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say, which sport are you talking about? Oh, yeah. I mean, Indiana was one of the worst teams in college football for the longest time. And to see what he has done there, Signetti, is really something. And to see Oregon sustain, Bellotti and just Chip Kelly, and they were good for a minute, and they seemed to drop off for a little bit. And then Mario comes in and gets it back where it needs to be. And then you get Lanning just going full force. It's a program now that's going to be around for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's fun to see. And what was different when I was in Eugene as the sports columnist there was that Chip Kelly had Oregon playing with the big boys. But when they got into some of those games, they didn't have the big kids in the trenches. So what Lanning has done is, and really Cristobal before him started the trend that way to be fair. But what Lanning has really done is brought in sort of the talent on the trenches, and now they still have the speed and the skill players that they had, like when Chip Kelly was doing stuff, and have turned him. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I think Oregon wins. I don't really know who wins OU Texas. If Mateer's healthy and he plays, I'll pick OU. But those are the two I'm really looking forward to. Any of those others kind of get you excited?
Yeah, I'm mentioning Ohio State, Illinois. Again, I know for the listeners who just rolled their eyes, I know what Indiana did to them. That doesn't mean anything 2 weeks later. In college football, they're going to come well coached, prepared. They're going to want a piece of Ohio State. Anytime a Big Ten team plays Ohio State, that's Super Bowl. That week for them doesn't get any bigger. So I want to see what Ohio State can do, against a team that's going to come in hungry with something to prove. So I'm definitely interested in that.
Yeah, I am too. And in Florida at Texas A&M too. Now look,
Yeah,
I think
let's see if Florida's what they got, if they're for real or not after that Texas win, if they're going to bounce back and Napier keep his job, really.
I struggle to see them moving the football against Texas A&M on the road or frankly anywhere like they did against Texas. But last week was a revelation for Florida because I do think Texas has a good defense and they made them look not so good. So look, plenty of stuff we could continue to talk about, but let's go ahead and take a break, get in the locker room, come back out. Second half, we'll talk about our favorite subject, faith. All right, we're back for the second half of Gridiron and the Gospel of Faith in College Football podcast. And this is the faith half, our favorite side, because look, Dean and I both love college football. And I'm really grateful that we get to not only watch it, but talk about it and that some of you guys listen to us about it. So thank you for that. But what we really love, who we really love is Jesus. He saved us. And our hope is that you see him in us and hear about him from us and that you might come to know him and have a relationship with him. And so we love talking about faith. And so back with Dean and Sarah. Dean, I know you have something that's on your heart this week.
Yeah, one thing we do whenever Miami comes to town is we always go to the team hotel. I take my boys up there, see the team. And also one of my buddies is the chaplain for Miami football.
That's cool.
Daryl Jones, strong evangelical, Southern Baptist church planter. He went to the famous Carter High School in Dallas back in their heyday. And then he was a starting wide receiver on the other side of Andre Johnson on the 2001 Miami National Championship team, the greatest team of all time, as we like to refer to it as. But I
all of us refer to it as that.
Thank you for that. And we were having a conversation and about just what's been going on with the team. And we talked football, of course, and talked about the game and all those things. But his chaplain role, and he had mentioned the guys on the team that have been baptized recently. And I just started thinking about the role of a chaplain on a football team. And one of the greatest ministries it has is to the coaches. A lot of times who, because of the way their staff functions, aren't able to go to church on Sunday, or they don't go to church in general unless they come from a Christian church going family. But for whatever reason, football accommodates faith and allows faith to be in the building. It's always just kind of been built in. And so the access that someone like Daryl and chaplains all over the country have towards coaches, towards players, to share the good news with them is just something that I think was on my heart that people need to commit to praying to. Like when you think about your football team, sometimes say a prayer for chaplains, team chaplains that have access. They're in the hotel dinner, table with the team. They're in the locker room. They're talking before the game. They're in the meeting rooms, but also to think about yourself as well. So I mentioned how Daryl, my friend, is sometimes the only believer that, active, adult believer that they have access to on a regular basis. And again, unless there's some coaches on staff, I'm not sure about that that are believers, but that's not my call. I don't have enough awareness to know. But at your workplace, you might be someone, who is the believer in the building, the one that people have access to, who knows the Lord and can share the good news of the gospel. So think about just the opportunities you have, and for every believer to see themselves as the unofficial chaplain at their workplace. Or maybe you're willing to ask to say a prayer before lunch and everybody goes to lunch together, or you just check on people and ask how they're doing. You invite somebody to church. You tell someone they're going to pray for them, and then there's something going on in their family. Like, what would it look like if every believer at their workplace saw themselves as the chaplain unofficially and function for that organization, that business, whatever it could be? And that was kind of my heart to see us take that approach when it comes to ministry and mission, wherever it is that God has us.
Man, I love that because that's exactly right. I was talking, Sunday we were talking, working through Titus and talked about older men. And one of the things that I said was, look, when you're supposed to be sound in faith, love, and endurance. And we talked about endurance for a little bit. And endurance is like, look, older men, sometimes we have this skewed vision of you work really hard, you build up savings for retirement, and then you kind of go out and relax. You go visit your grandkids, you go traveling in an RV, whatever, play golf. And obviously John Piper had the famous seashells reference and about, hey, why are we building for retirement? And one of the things that, and I'm sure that I'm not the first person that said this, was that I said was, when you retire, retirement is not the end of your mission. It's just a change in the platform for your mission. And
Definitely.
so that's about retirement, right? So it's like keep going, finish strong. It's the football team holding up the four fingers and finishing the fourth quarter, like the Baylor Bears did, which is another story. But it's but the point is, do you see the work you're doing before you get to retirement as mission? Are you a chaplain on mission in your accounting office, right? Are you a chaplain on mission in whatever it is you're doing, right? And so I really appreciate that. I mean that's how we should look at ourselves too. It's not just a specialized position for specialized people. If you're a follower of Christ, you are a chaplain to that workplace in that
Like
profession.
Corinthians 5, we're ambassadors for Christ as though Christ were making his appeal through us. What an awesome thing to think about.
Man, I love that. That is so good. All right, I got one other question. So you were talking to the chaplain at Miami and a friend of yours, and he's mentioning how some guys have come to faith and been baptized here recently. We've seen a lot of that, and you and I have talked a little bit about this on this podcast, I think. But Ohio State notably has had a bunch of guys, and then they seem to be really sort of using the platform they have to try to share the gospel, or at least tell people we love Jesus when they can. I see that with various, and maybe it's because we're attuned to it. But man, I was in this covering the sport as a journalist, as a Christ follower for years. And so I think I would have been attuned to it and didn't see it quite the way or to the volume or frequency. I don't know what the word is, probably volume too. And the unashamedness with which I'm seeing guys claim Christ, not just because they scored a touchdown, not just because they won, but just you're really seeing that. Do you see that? Or is that really me more kind of looking for it?
On the national scale, I definitely see it. And I'm thankful we have social media now so we can be aware of more of it and be encouraged. You can show it to your kids, hey, these guys love Jesus and they also are good at football. So I'm definitely seeing it more. What's the cause of it? I'm not really sure outside the Lord really just allowing access to college campuses and to see, again, I think the role of chaplains, I think the role of churches that care about college ministry. I think there's coaches out there that are being more and more strategic and more intentional about wearing their faith on their sleeve and it not just being a generic faith family football, but actual conviction about who Jesus is. I think I can't underestimate that. And that's who's around the team the most, are the coaches. So I think that's become more real. And so what a great time. I think we should celebrate that as believers first and as football fans also, to see more and more players actually knowing who Jesus is. What an awesome thing.
Man, I love it. And so I love hearing about faithful chaplains like at Miami, like at several of the other places I know. I love that. And it makes me think one other thing too, man, I'm going to talk just specifically to pastors. If you're a chaplain, high school football team, in the same way that I'm honored to be able to do that for the local high school here in Texas, would you please make sure you don't just sort of turn scripture into something it's not for the sake of a pregame, rah, go get 'em? Because that's easy to do. And recently had someone utilized Hebrews 12, right, where we help me out here. You've just had the Hall of Faith, right, with all these.
Great cloud
You've
of
got
witnesses.
got a great cloud of witnesses, watching you. And so you're supposed to run with, put your eyes on Jesus and run with endurance the race set before you. And we all know that sort of with the athletic imagery and everything else. Don't try to make the great cloud of witnesses your mom and your dad and the fans in the stands, right? Don't try to do that, y'all. And I realize most of us wouldn't do that, but there's a temptation to go, how can I make this applicable to this football game that's about to occur or this basketball game that's about to occur? Man, just be biblical and don't worry. And frankly, if you're going to use a scripture, maybe stay away from some of the athletic imagery, go somewhere else, find another text. But I just want to implore you guys that. So we've had some really good positive stuff talking about chaplains. I'm just saying, hey, do your best to stay away from sort of.
Easy to have no gospel and chaplain sermons. And so in the same way we have some wonderful guys out there doing good work, one thing that can really frustrate Christian coaches quickly is here's the chaplain getting his moment. And he goes up there and just does a motivational speech. And it's like, man, you missed this. Like you had a chance to really land the plane here and be clear on the gospel. And we got to hope that there's more chaplains who are willing to do that.
Yeah. And quite frankly, if you've got Christian coaches who will allow you I would say that the last moment when the chaplain gets called up to pray before they go out of the locker room is probably not the time to go into a full bore sermon. It's more like the night before the game or the morning of the game. It's if and when you can get a chapel type service. But when you get to those, man, be sure it's just biblical more than it is get them. Make sure it's that. All right, I got one more thing for you. I got a text message from a friend who is, Kevin Gall. He's one of the higher senior associate athletic directors at Baylor. I mentioned just a second ago that Baylor came back in the fourth quarter, beat Kansas State. And really, they were down 31-17 in the fourth quarter, came back, hit a field goal to go ahead with 31 seconds left. And then Kansas State drove down and had a chance for a really long field goal. Don't know if the guy would have made it, but Baylor blocked it. And so Baylor won the game. Everybody's excited. And so my friend texts me and he goes, "Hey, you need to read my tweet. It's very youth pastor-ish." So this is inside baseball for our pastor friends who listen. So his tweet was this: in church pulpits across Waco this morning. And by the way, the guy's name is Cooper Lands. He's a defensive lineman who reached up a big paw and blocked the kick. In church pulpits across Waco this morning, quote, "Yesterday at McLean Stadium, many times hope seemed lost, but the victory was ultimately sealed by Lands. Let me tell you about when all hope seemed lost and your victory was sealed by a lamb." Open your Bibles and turn to. And I thought to myself, that is exactly right. So that is every youth pastor I've ever known right there. So good stuff, though. So, well, hey, man, this has been a good, crisp show, and thanks for taking the time. And y'all, we did record this on Monday. Usually we record them on Sundays. We've had lots of life happening the last few weeks. We'll try to get back to that to where these drop on Monday mornings going forward. But we're going to wrap this thing up. Hey, we are on YouTube. Some of you guys already know it, and you've darkened your screen because you can't handle it. But search for Gridiron and the Gospel on YouTube. You can find us there. Also, you can find us online at gridironandthegospel.com. You can email us, and we'd really love to talk with you about football or faith in Christ just at gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. Reach out on Twitter at George Schroeder, at Dean and Sarah, or at gridiron_gospel. That's also an Instagram account. And tune in next week for more Gridiron and the Gospel of Faith in College Football podcast.